Get comfortable with English in comfort. This is your English listening practice podcast to help you learn and improve naturally.
Hey there, welcome back to English in Comfort. I'm Emily, and as always, I've got my co-host Liam with me today. How's it going, Liam?
Hey, Emily. I'm great, and I'm excited for today's topic. It's something so many people struggle with, but rarely talk about in depth.
Absolutely. So today we're diving into a question I know a lot of you have asked. How can I start thinking in English? It's one of those skills that can completely transform how you learn the language. When you stop translating in your head and start thinking in English, you feel so much more fluent and confident.
And the best part? It's not about memorizing tons of grammar or vocabulary. It's about training your brain in small, practical ways. We're going to break it all down for you, step by step.
And to make it even more fun, we'll share some tips, exercises, and even try a little challenge together. Think of it as learning English in a cozy, relaxed way. No pressure, just progress.
So whether you're a beginner or someone who's been learning English for years but still feels stuck, this podcast is for you.
So, let's start with a problem almost every English learner faces: translating in your head. Liam, have you noticed this when learning a new language?
Definitely. I've been there. You hear a sentence in English, and your brain immediately scrambles to translate it into your native language. It's like trying to solve a puzzle in real time. It's exhausting.
Exactly. And it's not just tiring, it slows you down. Imagine you're in a conversation and someone asks, "How was your weekend?" Instead of just answering, you have this process. First, you think about their question in your language. Then, you come up with a response in your language. Finally, you try to translate it back into English. By the time you're ready to answer, the moment has passed.
Right. And the person you're talking to might even think you're not interested or confident, which isn't true at all.
Let's break this down. Why do we translate in our heads in the first place? Well, it's because your brain feels safer in your native language. It's like a default setting. But here's the thing. The more you rely on translating, the harder it becomes to think directly in English. It's like trying to run a marathon while wearing heavy boots.
That's a great analogy. And here's where the shift begins. You need to teach your brain that it's okay to stay in English, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Think of it as training a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly. Here's a simple exercise. Instead of translating, start small by thinking in English about everyday things. For example, when you're cooking, try naming the ingredients in English: salt, pepper, onions, chicken. Or describe what you're doing: "I'm chopping vegetables, I'm boiling water." It doesn't have to be perfect. It's about building that habit.
Another thing that helps is labeling objects around you in English. I actually did this when I was learning Spanish. I'd put sticky notes on things like my desk, my laptop, even my coffee mug. Every time I saw them, I'd say their names in Spanish. It's such a simple trick, but it forces your brain to connect the object directly to the language without translating.
That's such a good tip. And for conversations, start by preparing a few key phrases in English that you use often in your native language. For example, instead of thinking, "What should I say when someone asks how I'm doing?" just memorize, "I'm doing great. How about you?" Once you've got those ready, you can skip the translation step entirely.
Yes, and don't forget to practice regularly. Even if it's just a few minutes a day, consistency is what makes the difference. And as you practice, be patient with yourself. Thinking in English isn't something that happens overnight. It's a gradual shift.
All right, so now that we've talked about not translating in your head, let's focus on something that can really speed up your progress: immersion. Liam, you've had some experience with this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing. A lot of people think immersion means you have to pack your bags and move to an English-speaking country. But honestly, you can create immersion right at home.
Think about it this way. Immersion is all about surrounding yourself with the language as much as possible. One of the easiest ways to do this is by changing the language settings on your phone, your computer, even your social media accounts. It forces your brain to process English without you even realizing it.
Totally. I did this with my streaming account too. I started watching shows in English even if I didn't understand everything at first. It's amazing how quickly your brain starts picking up patterns and phrases just by listening.
And speaking of listening, podcasts are another great way to immerse yourself. You can listen while you're commuting, cooking, or even relaxing on the couch. Just hearing natural conversations in English helps your brain get used to the rhythm and tone of the language.
Another trick I love is what I call the English zone. For example, set aside 30 minutes a day where everything you do is in English. If you're reading, choose an English book or article. If you're writing, jot down your thoughts in English. If you're speaking, talk to yourself in English. You'd be surprised how much this focused time helps.
I like that idea. It's like a mini English environment you create for yourself. And here's another one. Try to think of English as a lifestyle, not just a subject you're learning. For example, instead of looking up a recipe in your native language, search for it in English. Or if you're into fitness, follow English-speaking trainers on YouTube.
And it's not just about listening or reading. Speaking is a huge part of immersion too. Even if you don't have a conversation partner, you can practice by narrating what you're doing out loud. For example, I'm making coffee. The water is boiling. I'm pouring it into my cup. It feels silly at first, but it helps your brain get used to forming sentences in English.
And if you want to take it a step further, there are so many apps and online communities where you can connect with native speakers. Even just a 5-minute chat can make a big difference.
Absolutely. And don't forget to have fun with it. The more you enjoy the process, the easier it becomes. Watch your favorite movies in English, or even try writing a short story in English. The idea is to make it a part of your everyday life.
The more you surround yourself with English, the more natural it will feel. And the best part is, you don't need to leave your house to do it. It's all about being creative and consistent. Have you ever tried using visualization to think in English? It's one of my favorite techniques.
Visualization? No, I don't think I've heard of that. What is it exactly?
So visualization is when you imagine situations in your mind and narrate them in English. It's like creating a mental movie where you're the main character, and everything you think or say happens in English. For example, let's say you're planning your day. Instead of thinking, I need to go to the store, you imagine yourself walking there and think, I'm walking to the store. I need to buy apples, bread, and milk. It's simple, but really effective.
Interesting. So, it's like imagining daily life, but in English. That makes sense. How would someone start doing this? Is it just about narrating everything they do?
That's a great way to begin. Start small. Maybe while you're doing something like making coffee. Think, I'm boiling the water. I'm adding the coffee grounds. It might feel a bit silly at first, but it gets you used to forming sentences in English in real time.
Oh, I see. So it's like practicing without speaking out loud. That sounds easy to try.
You can imagine conversations too. For example, picture yourself meeting a friend at a cafe. In your mind, you could say, Hi, how are you? And then imagine their reply. You're basically rehearsing real-life situations, so when they actually happen, you've already practiced.
That's so clever.
The more detailed your visualization, the better. Let's say you're imagining a trip to the park. Think about the birds chirping, the kids playing, and the conversations you might overhear. And then, in your mind, respond to those conversations in English. It makes the practice more realistic and engaging.
It's kind of like mental role-playing in English. It's not just about learning vocabulary. It's about experiencing the language in your head.
And you can also use internal dialogues. For example, if you're thinking about what to eat for lunch, ask yourself in English, what should I have? Maybe a sandwich? Or pasta? Then answer yourself. It's a great way to practice everyday phrases without feeling pressured.
I like that idea. And I think it's something anyone can try, even if they're just starting out. It's private, low pressure, and you can do it anywhere.
Exactly. And it builds confidence. By the time you're in a real situation, it feels more natural because you've already practiced it in your mind. It's like giving yourself a head start.
I'm definitely trying this out. It sounds like an easy but powerful way to think in English.
It really is. And the best part is, it works for anyone. no matter their level. Once you start, you'll see how quickly it becomes second nature. Another powerful tip that's often overlooked is using your surroundings and context to think in English. This is something I personally love doing because it's so practical. Do you do this, Liam?
Sometimes, yes, but I feel like it's not as consistent as it could be. Can you explain what you mean by using surroundings?
Of course. It's about taking what's around you, your environment, and describing it in English, either in your head or out loud. For example, if you're in your kitchen, you could think, I'm grabbing a mug to make coffee, or I need to clean the counter. It's a way to immerse yourself in English, no matter where you are.
That's a great point. It reminds me of when I was learning Spanish. I used to walk around my apartment and label things in my head like, this is a chair, this is my backpack. It worked really well for vocabulary, but I guess I could have pushed it further to full sentences.
Vocabulary is a great starting point, but when you add sentences, you're training your brain to think in a more natural flow. And the best part is you don't need to carve out extra time for this. It fits into your daily life. What do you think?
I love it. And I think learners could make it a habit by setting small goals, like focusing on one room per day or even one activity, like cooking. As you cook, narrate what you're doing in English. It's simple and so effective.
Yes, and it doesn't have to be perfect. The key is to practice without worrying about grammar mistakes. It's about building the habit of thinking in English. And here's a fun idea. Try mixing this with visualization. Imagine you're explaining the process to a friend in English as you go. And if you're stuck, keep it simple. Start with what you know, and gradually add more detail as you get comfortable. The more you do this, the easier it becomes to think in English naturally.
It makes it more interactive, even if you're just talking to yourself. Plus, it's a great way to practice common phrases you'll likely use in real conversations.
Great. And for everyone listening, think about where you can apply this today. Is it at home, on your commute, or even while you're shopping? Use your surroundings to bring English into your thoughts. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground today. Visualization, describing your surroundings, creating scenarios. All these tips are practical and achievable. But how do we help someone take the first step?
I think the key is to start small and be consistent. Don't try to overhaul your entire thought process in one day. For example, pick one tip, like describing your surroundings, and focus on doing it for 5 to 10 minutes a day. Once that feels natural, add another technique, like visualization.
And don't be afraid to experiment. Maybe you try visualization one day and find it doesn't click right away. That's okay. Shift to narrating your daily tasks or even practicing phrases out loud. The point is to keep finding ways to engage with English in a way that feels comfortable and enjoyable.
And I'd say, don't get discouraged if it feels awkward at first. It's normal. Thinking in a new language is like building a muscle. It takes time, but the results are so worth it. Plus, you're actively training your brain to think more fluently, and that's a big deal.
That's such a good point. And another thing to remember is that there's no right or wrong way to do this. Your approach will evolve as you get more confident. What worked for you a month ago might change as you grow, and that's a sign of progress.
Totally. And for anyone listening, don't forget to celebrate your small wins. Maybe you successfully describe your breakfast in English one day, or you catch yourself thinking in English without even trying. Those moments are proof that you're improving.
Yes, progress often feels small and slow, but every bit counts. So, if you're listening and ready to take action, pick one of the techniques we discussed today and give it a try. Even just 5 minutes of practice can make a difference.
And don't overthink it. Remember, the goal is to make English a natural part of your daily life. So have fun with it, and let it be a process you enjoy, not a chore.
So everyone, thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear about your experience. What techniques work for you? Have you tried any of these tips before? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with anyone who's learning English. We're always here to help you practice and improve, one step at a time.